Welcome back to Seekers of Otherworldly and Unknown Legends. On this episode, we delve into the mysterious creature sightings across Indiana. Known by some as the Crossroads of America, I believe I can now say that it is also the cryptid crossroads of America. So, grab those drinks, sit back and relax, and join us as we venture into the unknown. Along the southern border of Indiana, the Ohio River moves with a deceptive calm. It snakes its way through river towns, slips beneath bridges, and carries with it centuries of commerce, conflict, and memory. But within these slow, muddy waters, where sunlight fades just a few feet down, some believe a creature lurks, unseen, beneath the surface. Not a fish, not a log, but a legend. This is the story of the Ohio River Serpent. For nearly 200 years, whispers of a massive, snake-like creature have followed the river's course. Descriptions vary, but the details are eerily consistent. A long, undulating body, dark or mottled skin, a head that defies easy classification, sometimes likened to a horse, sometimes an alligator, sometimes an enormous fish with ancient eyes. What makes these stories linger is not just what was seen, but who claimed to see it. Fishermen, steamboat captains, dock workers, and rivermen. People who knew the river intimately, its wildlife, its tricks, its dangers, and insisted that what they encountered was something entirely unknown and perhaps unnatural. The earliest reports stretch back to the mid-1800s when the Ohio River was a highway of steam and timber. Men navigating massive paddle boats told of something pacing their vessels, a dark shape just beneath the surface, moving faster than the current itself. Dock workers spoke of sudden disturbances in otherwise still waters, ripples with no wind, wakes with no boat. Local newspapers in Indiana and Kentucky occasionally ran short, curious reports. A water monster, a serpent of unusual size, a creature estimated anywhere from 15 to 30 feet long. One of the most widely shared stories emerged in the 1870s near Madison, Indiana. A group of fishermen claimed a colossal serpentine form rose alongside their boat without warning. The water displaced by its body rocked the vessel, and for a brief moment they could appreciate its full length, smooth, dark, impossibly large, before it slipped back beneath the surface as silently as it had appeared. No splash, no struggle, just gone. As the decades rolled on, the sightings did not stop. They spread. In the early 20th century, reports surfaced near Evansville, New Albany, and Jeffersonville. Witnesses described long, dark shapes gliding against the current, coiling near sandbars, or surfacing just long enough to reveal a series of humps. Some compared the creature to a plesiosaur, others to a giant eel, an animal that would seem more at home in deep oceans than inland rivers. The Ohio River itself played a role in shaping the legend. Its waters are thick with sediment, especially after heavy rains. Visibility is poor, and depth perception is unreliable. Objects beneath the surface warp and stretch. Shadows become monsters. Movement becomes intent. Skeptics have long offered rational explanations. The Ohio River is home to large, powerful fish. Lake sturgeon, though rare today, once grew to impressive sizes and could startle anyone unfamiliar with their prehistoric appearance. Alligator gar swim in groups, their long bodies breaking the surface in ways that look unsettlingly coordinated. Even floating logs caught in swirling currents can twist and snake across the water. There are also deer, strong swimmers, whose heads and backs can resemble something far stranger when glimpsed from a distance. And yet, many who saw the serpent insisted they were not fooled by shadows. And here is the thing, many of those eyewitnesses were familiar with all of that. These were men and women who spent their lives on the river. They knew gar. They knew sturgeon. They knew logs and debris and the tricks of current and light. And still, they said, this was different. Today, no scientific evidence confirms the existence of the Ohio River Serpent. No bones, no photographs beyond blurred shapes and rippling water, and yet the legend refuses to fade. It persists in river towns, in old newspaper clippings, in stories told at docks and bait shops, usually late in the day, when the water turns dark and the current grows quiet. Maybe the serpent was a misidentified animal. Maybe it was the river playing tricks on tired eyes. Or maybe, just maybe, it was something otherworldly, something unknown. The Ohio River Serpent is not unique either. Similar legends ripple throughout the Mississippi River Basin. From Kentucky to Illinois to Ohio, stories emerge of massive river creatures surfacing during floods or seasonal migrations, times when the river behaves unpredictably and wildlife acts out of character. Indiana holds at least 2 more of its own aquatic serpent cryptid legends. The White River Monster. When people hear the phrase White River Monster, their minds usually drift south to Newport, Arkansas, where a mysterious creature once earned its own legislative refuge. But tonight, we are staying closer to home, because winding quietly through the heart of Indiana is a river with stories just as strange, just as unsettling, and just as enduring. This is the Indiana White River. And for more than a century, Hoosiers have whispered about something living beneath its surface. The White River does not roar, it slides. It curves lazily past cornfields, factory towns, and wooded banks that feel unchanged since the 1800s. And that quiet familiarity may be exactly why the stories linger. When something does not belong in a place you know well, it stands out forever. Indiana's first great encounter with the monster came in the summer of 1892, near what are now the cities of Fishers and Noblesville. 2 men traveling by wagon along the river claimed they saw something massive moving through the water alongside them. Not a fish, not a log. A serpent. They described the creature as nearly 12 feet long and thick, 3 feet in circumference, with a forked tail slicing through the water. It moved with purpose, undulating smoothly as if the river itself were alive. News of the sighting spread fast. In small river towns, stories did not just travel, they multiplied. Within days, 5 local men organized what newspapers gleefully called a monster hunt. And soon they announced success. What they presented, however, was anticlimactic. A bloated, decomposing cowhide, snagged on river debris. Case closed, skeptics said. A hoax, a misidentification, a lesson in letting imagination run wild. But believers were not convinced. A dead cow, they argued, does not swim, it does not undulate, and it certainly does not have a forked tail. To them, the cow was not the monster. It was the cover story. As decades passed, the White River Monster did not disappear, but another theory surfaced. One with teeth. Fishermen throughout the mid-1900s reported hauling in creatures that felt less like fish and more like prehistoric survivors. Alligator gar. Massive ones. In one documented case, an 8-foot-long gar weighing over 200 pounds was pulled from the White River system. Picture it. Dusk. The water glassy. Then something breaks the surface. A long, armored back. A spiny ridge. A snout lined with teeth. Older than civilization itself. You do not need imagination to call that a monster. Just bad lighting and a racing heart. Over time, Indiana's White River sightings settled into 3 familiar forms. First, the serpent, the original. Long, sleek, and moving in smooth snake-like waves. This is the creature of 1892, the one that started it all. Second, the leatherback. A massive, gray, wrinkled being described as the size of a car, with skin like an elephant. This version is more common in Arkansas lore, but some Indiana witnesses believe the monster migrates, traveling the Mississippi watershed like a ghost with fins. And finally, the giant gar. Toothy, spiny-backed, real, documented, and terrifying enough to explain many encounters, if you are inclined toward reason. But the legends do not survive on reason alone. Unlike Arkansas, Indiana never passed laws to protect its monster. No official refuge, no government acknowledgement. Instead, the White River Monster lives where folklore always thrives, in community memory and waterside campfire stories. In recent years, towns like Fishers and Noblesville have leaned into the legend. Autumn festivals feature the White River Serpent as a mascot, blending history, humor, and a wink to the past. Kids wear monster costumes, parents tell stories they once heard whispered themselves. Whether it was a misidentified sturgeon, an out-of-place manatee, a giant gar, or something we still do not have a name for, the White River Monster refuses to sink into obscurity. It lingers beneath the surface of the water and of the imagination, because rivers remember. And sometimes, when the current slows and the light hits just right, it feels like something is still moving down there, watching, waiting, just beneath Indiana's calm, muddy waters. Next is the Indiana Lake Monster. When people think of lake monsters, their minds usually drift to misty Scottish highlands and the dark waters of Loch Ness. Indiana, flat farmlands, cornfields, and quiet glacial lakes do not exactly scream cryptid country. And yet, beneath those calm Midwestern waters, stories have been stirring for more than a century. Stories of something large, something serpentine, something that does not belong. This is the legend of the Indiana Lake Monster. Unlike Nessie, Indiana does not claim one single iconic creature tied to a famous lake. Instead, the Indiana Lake Monster is a patchwork legend, a collection of sightings spread across the state, connected by eerily similar descriptions, from Lake Michigan's Indiana waters to inland lakes like Bass Lake, Cedar Lake, Lake Manitou, and Pleasant Lake. Witnesses have reported strange aquatic beings lurking just below the surface. Different lakes, different decades, same unsettling feeling. The earliest known reports date back to the late 1800s, a time when Indiana was still shedding its frontier identity. Settlers, fishermen, and boaters began telling stories that found their way into small-town newspapers. These were not campfire tales, whispered after dark. They were printed accounts, treated seriously enough to make headlines. Witnesses described long, snake-like bodies gliding beneath the water. Some spoke of dark humps breaking the surface. Others claimed to see a head rise briefly before vanishing again, leaving behind a wake that rippled across otherwise calm lakes. In an era before sonar, underwater cameras, or even widespread scientific knowledge of freshwater species, these sightings captured the imagination of entire communities. One lake in particular stands at the center of Indiana's lake monster lore, Lake Manitou. Long before settlers arrived, the Potawatomi people knew this body of water by another name, Devil's Lake. According to indigenous tradition, the lake was home to a powerful water spirit, often described as serpent-like in form. This being was said to control storms, stir violent waters, and claim lives through sudden drownings. The lake was respected and feared. When European settlers arrived, they brought their own worldview, but they did not leave the stories behind. Over time, the supernatural water spirit transformed into something more familiar to frontier imaginations, a lake monster. Throughout the decades, Lake Manitou has produced reports of massive shapes moving against the current, unexplained wakes forming on glassy water, and sudden splashes far too large to be caused by fish. To those who witnessed it, the lake did not just feel alive, it felt watchful. But Manitou was not alone. At Bass Lake in the early 20th century, residents told stories of a creature they called a water panther. Descriptions varied, but most agreed it had an elongated reptilian body and moved with smooth, deliberate purpose near boats. Some claimed it followed them silently, just below the surface. Cedar Lake generated its own headlines. Newspapers reported a creature with a horse-like head and fish-like body, alarming picnickers along the shore. The image was so strange, so specific, that it lingered in public memory long after the articles faded. Even Indiana's smaller glacial lakes are not exempt. Over the years, witnesses have described giant eels, prehistoric-looking fish, and multi-humped serpents surfacing briefly before disappearing into murky depths. No photographs, no physical evidence, just shaken observers and stories passed down through generations. Of course, skeptics have their explanations, and they are not unreasonable. Again, skeptics point to the fact that Indiana waters once supported massive lake sturgeon, some stretching over 6 feet long. A sturgeon surfacing to feed, roll, or breach can look shockingly monstrous to some not expecting it. Large catfish, otters swimming in a line, or even partially submerged logs pushed by wind and current can easily trick the eye. Add in sunlight glare, rippling water, or algae-clouded depths, and familiar objects can become something far more unsettling. But the sightings never fully stop. And again, Indiana is not alone. Similar lake monster legends exist across the Midwest. In Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Ohio. They tend to appear in rural areas where people live close to the water, where stories are told and retold, evolving with each generation. Today, sightings of the Indiana lake monster are far less frequent. Modern technology has stripped away much of the unknown, but the legend remains, quietly anchored in local lore, resurfacing whenever the water goes still and someone notices a ripple moving the wrong way. Was it a fish, a trick of the light, or something older, something that had always been there, waiting beneath Indiana's lakes? Whatever the truth, the Indiana lake monster continues to haunt the edges of Midwestern imagination, a reminder that sometimes the greatest mysteries are not found in distant places, but right beneath our own reflection on the water. So, as long as rivers keep flowing and fishermen cast their lines into lakes, as long as shadows move beneath their surfaces, there will always be those who wonder, what else might be swimming just out of sight? Another semi-aquatic creature secured its place in Indiana folklore. For this tale, we are heading to a quiet corner of northeastern Indiana, to a small town called Churubusco. It is here that one of Indiana's most enduring and puzzling legends first surfaced, the tale of the Beast of Busco. Now, when I say beast, I am not talking about a wolf, a bear, or even a Bigfoot sighting. No, this creature is something a little slower. But do not let the pace fool you. What lurks beneath the waters of Folk Lake is said to be massive, enormous even, so large, according to eyewitnesses, that it could overturn boats and was roughly the size of a dining room table. The story begins in the late 1940s, when a man named Gale Harris, owner of the property surrounding Folk Lake, claimed he saw something incredible. A giant turtle surfacing from the depths, its dark shell glistening in the sunlight. Now, Harris was not the only one to witness the creature. Soon, neighbors and visitors alike reported catching glimpses of a massive shape moving just beneath the lake's surface. What started as local chatter quickly snowballed. Word spread, and curious crowds descended upon Churubusco, eager for a glimpse of this mysterious turtle. Harris, determined to prove the creature's existence, tried everything. He drained portions of the lake. He constructed elaborate traps. He even organized a full-scale search, calling in volunteers to scour the water. But each attempt ended in frustration. The turtle, if it was truly there, seemed to vanish just as the humans closed in. It was as if the creature had a sixth sense for eluding capture. Or perhaps it was simply not there at all. Newspapers took notice. Headlines like "Giant Turtle of Busco Evades Capture" and "Indiana's Monster Turtle Sparks National Curiosity" ran across the country. Suddenly, this small town was on the map, its fame tied to a turtle that may or may not exist. Eyewitness reports were strikingly consistent. The Beast of Busco, often affectionately dubbed Oscar, was described as much larger than any common snapping turtle, and even larger than the rare alligator snapping turtles native to the American South. Skeptics had their own explanations. Some suggested the sightings were misidentifications. Perhaps a large log, a floating stump, or a play of light on the water. Others entertained the idea that a truly massive turtle could have migrated north, remaining hidden in the murky depths of Folk Lake for decades. And in truth, snapping turtles are capable of remarkable longevity and growth. So, while Oscar may seem fantastical, it is at least biologically plausible that a turtle of extraordinary size could exist. The story of the Beast of Busco is not just an isolated Midwestern oddity. Tales of oversized turtles appear throughout Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, and even across parts of the Great Lakes region. These stories often center on lakes or rivers with limited visibility, perfect environments for either a misidentified object or a creature of myth to hide. The Beast of Busco is not just a story about size or sightings. It is about community, mystery, and the allure of the unknown. Even today, decades after Gale Harris first reported his encounter, Churubusco celebrates this legend with an annual festival called Turtle Days. The event honors both the tale and the people who helped shape it, ensuring that the story of Oscar remains alive, passed from generation to generation. So, did the Beast of Busco ever truly exist? No one has captured definitive proof. No giant turtle has been measured or photographed up close. And yet, the legend persists. Next time you pass a quiet lake, you might be tempted to peer into its depths. Who knows what you will see? Perhaps just a ripple on the water, or perhaps something far larger, lurking where the sunlight barely reaches. And if you happen to find yourself near Folk Lake in Churubusco, keep an eye out. You might just spot the Beast of Busco, or, at the very least, you will see a town that has embraced its legend with open arms. Next, I bring you the story of yet another semi-aquatic creature. This one far more intimidating and terrifying than an oversized turtle. Let us look to Decatur County, Indiana, to uncover a tale that is as eerie as it is obscure, the legend of the Greensburg Greenclaw. Unlike the more famous cryptids of Indiana, Greenclaw has never drawn national headlines. Yet its story, whispered among locals since the mid-20th century, is a uniquely chilling piece of Hoosier folklore. Greenclaw is described as a humanoid creature, its skin a deep, unsettling green, textured almost like scales. Its hands, large, clawed, and menacing, have drawn comparison to aquatic monsters, reptilian humanoids, and even creatures of old sea legends. Its habitat? Water. Streams, creeks, and swampy areas near Greensburg seem to be its domain. The most notable sightings occurred in the 1950s. A local resident walking along a creek claimed to have seen something that stopped them in their tracks. Emerging from the water, the figure was tall and humanoid, its green skin glistening as though coated in algae or slime. The arms were long, ending in sharp claws, moving with a strange combination of awkwardness and deliberate caution, as if the creature was both curious and wary. Terrified, the witness fled, later recounting the encounter to friends and neighbors. That story, though sensational, did not make headlines. Instead, it became a quiet local legend, whispered at regional folklore gatherings, or shared over back porch conversations. Unlike other Indiana cryptids, the Greenclaw stayed underground, its mystery preserved by obscurity. Folklorists suggest that this very quietness may have helped the tale retain its authenticity, untouched by media sensationalism or exaggeration. But Greensburg is not unique in reporting such creatures. Across the Midwest, sightings of reptilian or amphibious humanoids appear in the folklore record. Loveland, Ohio famously claims the Loveland Frogman, while parts of Kentucky and Illinois report humanoid beings associated with water, sometimes described as frog-like, lizard-like, or fish-like. Across these stories, common elements emerge: semi-aquatic habits, humanoid shapes, and sudden, startling appearances near rivers, creeks, or swampy areas. Could the Greenclaw be Indiana's link in this chain of aquatic mysteries? Of course, not everyone believes in monsters lurking near Greensburg. Skeptics point to more mundane explanations. Could the creature have been a large heron or an upright standing otter, momentarily distorted in the observer's mind. Perhaps a person covered in mud and vegetation was mistaken for something otherworldly. The region's waterways are home to snapping turtles, large fish, and dense plant life that, under the right light, or lack thereof, could create illusions capable of frightening even the most level-headed observer. The timing of the sightings may also offer some clues. The 1950s were a decade obsessed with the strange and the monstrous. Science fiction cinema flourished, atomic mutation fears were widespread, and tales of monsters and otherworldly beings were embedded in popular culture. It is possible that cultural influences shaped how local encounters were interpreted. What someone might today recognize as a misidentified animal could, in that era, easily be seen as a lurking cryptid. Yet for all the skepticism, the Greenberg green claw endures, not because of physical evidence, of which there is none, but because of atmosphere, mystery, and the imagination. Imagine walking along a quiet creek at dusk, the water's surface shimmering, the air thick with mist, and then something green and scaled with long, clawed arms glides just out of reach. That moment, brief yet unforgettable, is the essence of the Green Claw legend. And there is a strange power in these quiet, localized tales. Unlike stories that flood newspapers or television screens, the Green Claw survives in whispers and the small community connections that keep folklore alive. For some, that subtle persistence is enough to lend it a sense of truth, or at least the feeling that the world holds more than we can see. Whether the Greensburg Green Claw was ever a flesh and blood creature, or merely a product of imagination, observation, and fear, it remains an indelible part of Indiana's cryptid history. Its chilling image, semi-aquatic habits, and quiet legend make it a uniquely compelling mystery, a story told softly yet capable of haunting anyone who ventures near the water after dark. So next time you find yourself near a rural creek, as the mist rises and the water ripples in the moonlight, keep an eye out. You might just feel the brush of something green, lurking and observing. The Greensburg Green Claw. Well, I don't know about all of you, but I'm ready to move on from aquatic creatures. Not sure I'll be so anxious to go on my next float trip. With that said, moving further inland, we have a couple forest dwellers of a less fantastic nature, but no less dangerous. Perhaps even more so. I bring you first the Black Panther of Blue River, and second, the Wampus Cat. From the 1950s through the 1970s, residents of Hamilton County began reporting a large, dark cat-like animal stalking the riverbanks. It leapt fences, it attacked livestock, it moved with speed and confidence. Locals called it a black panther, despite Indiana having no confirmed panther population. And because these sightings clustered near the river, the creature became folded into the growing mythology of the White River Monster. Was it the same entity, or was the river simply a magnet for the unexplained? We venture into the forests, creeks, and farmland of southern Indiana to explore a creature that has captivated and frightened residents over a century. A creature known only as the Black Panther of Blue River. Stretching through Harrison, Crawford, and Washington counties, the Blue River winds like a silver ribbon through dense forests and rugged hills. It is a serene, almost timeless landscape, but locals will tell you that beneath the canopy, something dark moves, something large, something alive. The first reports of the Black Panther date back to the late 1800s, when early settlers and farmers began whispering about a mysterious feline stalking their livestock. They described a sleek black animal with a long, muscular tail, moving with a grace and power unlike anything they had seen in these woods. Some said its eyes glowed in the moonlight, reflecting gold and green like lanterns in the night. Back then, mountain lions still occasionally wandered into the Midwest, and hunters and farmers took such sightings seriously. But no evidence ever surfaced. No tracks, no carcass, nothing tangible. Still, the stories spread, and over the decades, the legend only grew. By the 1930s, sightings surged. Hunters, fishermen, and hikers spoke of eerie, guttural screams echoing through the trees, sounds unlike a bobcat or a coyote. And sometimes, if you were lucky or unlucky, you would catch a glimpse of a shadowy feline slipping silently through the underbrush. Witnesses swore it was larger than any domestic animal, far stronger, and impossibly fast. Yet, despite the numerous accounts, wildlife officials have consistently dismissed the black panther. They point out a simple biological fact. No species of black panther exists in North America. While leopards and jaguars can appear black through melanism, those cats are native to Africa, Asia, and South America, not Indiana. And while cougars, mountain lions, do roam parts of the U.S., there is no verifiable black variant. Skeptics argue that sightings could be misidentifications, a large dog in the woods, a dark-colored feral cat, or even an exotic pet that escaped captivity. But here's the thing. Some reports come from people who know the woods better than anyone. Seasoned hunters, outdoorsmen, and even law enforcement officers. They insist what they saw was no ordinary animal. Something about its presence, its size, the way it moved. There was nothing familiar about it. And the mystery is not confined to the Blue River corridor. Across the Midwest, in Ohio, Illinois, and Kentucky, similar reports of black panther-like creatures have surfaced for decades. These sightings tend to cluster in remote areas, along deep forests, rivers, and low population zones, places where a large, elusive animal could, theoretically, survive undetected. Some researchers suggest that mid-20th century private ownership of exotic cats could explain a few isolated cases, but it does not account for the century-long, consistent reports from multiple independent sources. So, what is the black panther of Blue River? Could it be a misidentified cougar, a relic of an exotic escapee that thrived for a few years? Or perhaps something even stranger, a cryptid that defies conventional understanding? For locals, it does not much matter. The creature has become part of southern Indiana's identity. New sightings are still reported, sometimes in local newspapers, sometimes shared quietly among neighbors. Hikers and campers speak of watching shadows shift in the woods, of hearing unexplainable screams late at night. And for generations, children have grown up hearing about the black panther as a part of the region's folklore, a living emblem of the wild, untamed side of Indiana. Some say the panther is a reminder of the forest's forgotten majesty, of nature pushing back against the encroachment of farms, roads, and towns. Others see it as a trick of the mind, a story that survives because humans are hardwired to seek the unknown, to be captivated by what they cannot see. Yet the legend persists, and maybe, just maybe, that is the point. For in the quiet corners of Harrison, Crawford, and Washington counties, when the moonlight shimmers on the Blue River and the forest falls silent, you might just feel it, the presence of something large, sleek, and utterly mysterious, watching from the shadows. Whether real, imagined, or somewhere in between, the Black Panther of Blue River continues to captivate imaginations. It is a story of the wild heart of Indiana, a legend that refuses to die, no matter how many skeptics shake their heads. Perhaps a rival, a companion, or a variant of the Black Panther of Blue River is a creature that has haunted the forests and fields of southern Indiana for over a century. The elusive and enigmatic Wampus Cat. Most people associate the Wampus Cat with the Appalachian Mountains, stretching from the Carolinas up through Tennessee. But here in Indiana, particularly in the southern counties along the Ohio River, this legendary feline has carved out its own chapter in local folklore. Similar to the Black Panther, the Wampus Cat is described as panther-like, larger than any bobcat, with glowing eyes that pierce the darkness, an unnaturally long tail, and a scream that can make even the most seasoned hunter's blood run cold. The earliest stories from Indiana date back to the early 20th century, emerging from communities tucked into the rolling hills of Harrison, Crawford, and Orange counties, further raising my suspicion that these two cryptids may be one and the same. Hunters and trappers told of shadowy figures slipping silently through dense underbrush, too large to be a bobcat, too sleek to be a feral dog. These encounters often happened at dusk or during late-night hunts when the forest was still and the imagination could easily transform a rustle in the leaves into something far more sinister. The period between the 90s and 1960s was particularly rich in Wampus Cat lore. Rural Indiana seemed alive with sightings of mysterious big cats, some perhaps misidentified cougars, others potentially escaped exotic pets. But the Wampus Cat legend added a layer of the uncanny. Witnesses reported cats with unusual markings, upright posture, or behavior that suggested intelligence, like pacing along property edges or silently observing humans without fear. And then there were the screams, piercing, bone-chilling cries that echoed through the hills at night, described as somewhere between a woman's wail and a panther's roar. For many locals, hearing that sound was enough to keep them indoors after dark. The mythic roots of the Wampus Cat run deep. In Cherokee tradition, one story tells of a woman who spied on a sacred ceremony and was cursed, transformed into a half-woman, half-cat creature. Themes of transformation, vengeance, and supernatural power traveled north with Appalachian settlers and blended seamlessly into Indiana's landscape. Here, the Wampus Cat became a flexible figure, at once a cryptid, a cautionary tale, and a shadowy presence lurking at the edge of imagination and reality. Indiana's stories also fit into a wider regional pattern. Kentucky has its panther hollers. Ohio residents speak of Black Panther sightings, and even Illinois carries tales of the prairie cat. Across the Midwest, rural communities have long told stories of giant cats guarding forests, farms, and rivers, creatures that exist somewhere between wildlife and myth. The Wampus Cat in Indiana is part of this larger tapestry, a reminder of how folklore can move, evolve, and adapt. Of course, science offers more mundane explanations. Many sightings may have been misidentified cougars returning to the Midwest, large feral dogs, or melanistic bobcats, rare, dark-colored variants of a known species. And yet, despite these rational possibilities, countless eyewitnesses insist that what they saw was unlike any animal cataloged in a field guide. The Wampus Cat persists because it occupies that rare space where natural explanation falters and the imagination takes over. Even today, in the quiet corners of Indiana's southern woodlands, the Wampus Cat remains a figure of fascination and fear. It is a creature that embodies the tension between wilderness and civilization, myth and reality. Some see it as a guardian of the forest, a supernatural protector of the untamed. Others fear it as a predator, a creature of the night that reminds us just how little we truly understand about the world around us. And for storytellers, it is a bridge to the past, a living echo of the fears, hopes, and imaginations of generations who walked these hills before us. So next time you are driving down the back road after sunset, or walking through the shadows of a quiet forest, keep your ears open. A rustle in the underbrush, a gleam of eyes, or a distant unearthly scream might just be the Wampus Cat or the Black Panther of Blue River, still stalking the stories of southern Indiana and still keeping one paw firmly in the realm of legend. Okay, I have saved, in my opinion, the best for last. These next handful of Indiana cryptids are of a much more fantastic nature and only get more fascinating as we go along. So stick around. We journey along a railroad that once connected communities across northern and central Indiana. A railroad of commerce, of travel, of steel and steam, and of shadows. This is the story of the Monon Railroad Monster. Stretching through towns like Monon, Delphi, Bloomington, and Cedar Lake, the Monon Railroad was more than just a line of steel tracks. For decades, it threaded through forests, marshlands, and remote farmland, areas where the light of day gave way quickly to the black velvet of night. And it is in those hours, fog rolling across the rails, the whistle of a distant engine, that the first sightings of the monster began to surface. Railroad workers, travelers, and local residents began whispering about a strange presence, an entity lurking near the tracks. Some described it as tall and humanoid with limbs that seemed just a little too long, moving with a loping, awkward gait. Others swore it resembled a fur-covered beast like a Bigfoot, but gaunter, quicker, and almost predatory. Engineers recalled nights when headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating a looming figure just ahead. But before brakes could be applied, the creature would vanish, leaving only the tracks and the chill of an unexplained encounter. Over the years, these reports multiplied, particularly from the 1940s through the 1970s, painting a picture of a being that seemed to haunt not just the rails, but the imagination of anyone who traveled them. Locals tell of eerie sounds along the line, low growls echoing in the fog, distorted howls that sent shivers down the spine, and heavy footsteps crunching over gravel where no one should have been. Some farmers spoke of missing livestock with mysterious tracks leading from barns into the thick underbrush flanking their properties. In culverts and drainage tunnels, in thickets just beyond the rails, eyes sometimes glowed like distant lanterns. Over time, one theory gained traction. The Monon Railroad Monster was a railside Bigfoot. The cleared corridors of the railroad, stretching uninterrupted across forested land, offered an ideal pathway for a creature trying to move unseen. It is a theory echoed in neighboring states, Michigan, Ohio, Illinois, where trains and tracks have long been the stage for similar sightings of elusive beasts. But not everyone believes. Skeptics point to more mundane explanations. Large dogs or deer wandering near the tracks, or transient individuals seeking shelter in the shadows, could easily be mistaken for something otherworldly, especially under poor lighting or dense fog. Steam from the old locomotives, combined with the isolation of late-night rail work, may have amplified fear and imagination, creating a legend out of a misstep or a shadow. Yet even among doubters, the legend endures. Perhaps it is the human tendency to fill the dark with possibility, to turn unknown spaces into tales that both warn and thrill. Railroads, after all, have long been associated with mystery and American folklore. Lonely tracks, the hum of engines, and the darkness beyond. These are the perfect conditions for stories to take root. Today, the Monon Railroad is largely defunct. Much of its route has been converted into trails or reclaimed by nature. The trains are gone, but the stories remain, carried forward by local storytellers, historians, and cryptid enthusiasts. The monster itself is never seen on a map or in a photograph, but in a way, it never truly disappears. Every shadow along a trail, every unexpected rustle in the trees, keeps the legend alive. So the next time you find yourself walking an old railroad trail in northern Indiana, listen closely. The wind in the trees, the creak of a distant bridge, the crunch of gravel underfoot. It might just be the Monon Railroad Monster, pacing the tracks, as it has done for decades, and remaining a legend of the unknown. Returning again to southern Indiana, we look this time to the rolling hills, limestone ridges, and shadowy hollows of the Hoosier State. And here, amid the forests and creeks of Harrison County, lurks a creature that has puzzled locals for more than a century, the Harrison County Hobgoblin. Unlike the towering monsters that dominate popular lore, the Hobgoblin is small, humanoid, but almost impossibly peculiar. Imagine a figure no taller than 4 feet, with large glowing eyes that seem to pierce the night, long spindly fingers, and a gait that is more unsettling than threatening. Locals often describe it as moving with a mischievous, jerky rhythm, disappearing into brush or caves faster than the eye can follow. The earliest accounts of this mysterious being date back to the late 19th century. Farmers, men and women who knew the rhythms of their land, claimed to see a tiny shadowy figure lurking around barns, chicken coops, and creek beds. These early sightings described the hobgoblin as having a distorted, almost grotesque face and leathery or grayish skin. While not overtly dangerous, it was blamed for the kind of trouble only a creature of the night could cause. Missing livestock, upended garden plots, strange noises echoing across the hills at midnight. By the 90s and 50s, the legend began to solidify. In this period, rural Indiana experienced a spike in interest in mysterious creatures, UFO sightings, and unexplained phenomena. Families living alongside isolated country roads told stories of small humanoids darting across fields, crouching near property lines, or vanishing when approached. Children spoke of a little goblin man hiding beneath bridges or peering from behind trees. These accounts spread quickly, carried along by word of mouth, letters to local newspapers, and late-night conversations at general stores. Fear, fascination, and disbelief blended together in a way that kept the legend alive. What makes the Harrison County Hobgoblin especially intriguing is how it fits into a broader tapestry of Midwestern folklore. Just over the state lines, Kentucky is home to the infamous Hopkinsville Goblins. Ohio whispers of the Loveland Frogman, and countless little people tales link these creatures to caves, waterways, or subterranean hideaways. Harrison County's geography only adds to the mystery. The region's limestone ridges, karst formations, and labyrinthine cave networks create the perfect environment for a small, elusive being, something that might live unseen, emerging only occasionally under the cover of darkness. Skeptics, of course, have their explanations. Some suggest that upright raccoons, injured deer, or other nocturnal animals were mistaken for the hobgoblin. Others argue that shadows, moonlight, and the isolation of rural life combine to create vivid, yet imaginary sightings. There's even speculation that the culture of early 20th century Indiana, isolated farms, moonshine stills, and quiet nights, encouraged a certain level of storytelling embellishment. Yet, despite these explanations, many eyewitnesses remain adamant. Farmers, hunters, and children alike insist that what they saw was no ordinary animal, no trick of light, something different, something watching. One story, passed down from a Corridon family, tells of a late summer evening when a man tending his fields noticed movement near a stone wall. At first, he thought it was a raccoon, but the figure stood upright, paused to look directly at him, and then, almost playfully, vanished into the thickets. Another tale recounts a child walking home from school, only to see a small figure crouched beneath a bridge, eyes reflecting the fading sunlight, before it darted away faster than any human could. Tales like these, passed from generation to generation, have kept the hobgoblin alive in local imagination. Today, sightings are rare. The forests are quieter, the barns fewer, and the modern world has encroached on these old hollows. Yet the Harrison County Hobgoblin survives in stories, campfire whispers, and cryptid discussions among enthusiasts. Some say the creature is a remnant of old folklore, a trickster spirit tied to the land itself. Others believe it could be a cryptid, a species unknown, skirting the edges of human observation. Whatever the truth may be, the hobgoblin remains one of Indiana's most intriguing small-scale mysteries. It reminds us that even in the quiet, rolling hills of the Midwest, the world holds shadows we cannot fully explain. And perhaps, just as the sun sets over the limestone ridges in the Blue River, there are still eyes glowing in the dark, watching, waiting, and disappearing before we can ever truly understand. Speaking of the, let us call them, little cryptids of Indiana, the Native Americans that once called Indiana home spoke of a mischievous creature, perhaps a prequel to the legend of the Harrison County Hobgoblin, or perhaps a distant cousin. Stepping into the shadowy forests and ancient earthworks of Mound State Park near Anderson, we explore one of the state's most enigmatic folklore beings, the Pukwudgie. Now, if you have never heard of a Pukwudgie, imagine a creature no taller than 3 feet, humanoid in shape, but with features that seem almost otherworldly. In some accounts, they sport large pointed ears, broad noses, and even quills along their backs. They dwell in the forests, disappearing and reappearing at will, capable of both playful trickery and dangerous mischief. And while today they occupy the realm of cryptid lore, their roots run deep in the traditions of indigenous peoples, particularly the Algonquian-speaking nations like the Wampanoag and the Lenape, whose ancestral lands stretched into what is now Indiana. The very name Pukwudgie is often interpreted to mean something like little man of the woods who vanishes, and vanish they do, or so the story goes. In indigenous oral traditions, Pukwudgie were not always seen as malevolent. Some were playful tricksters, capable of petty pranks on humans, but cross them or provoke them, and you might find yourself bewildered, lost, or worse. Tales tell of Pukwudgies firing poison arrows, leading travelers astray, or even turning against humans after an initial period of friendship. Allegedly, they possess magical abilities to mimic voices, luring unwary hikers to walk off cliffs in search of a friend calling for attention. Here in Indiana, the legend is especially tied to Mound State Park. This site, already steeped in history, boasts prehistoric earthworks built by ancient indigenous cultures and later inhabited by the Lenape and Miami peoples. These earthworks, with their mysterious shapes and long-forgotten purposes, provide the perfect backdrop for a creature as elusive as the Pukwudgie. One of the most widely cited modern accounts comes from Paul Startzman, an amateur archaeologist from Anderson. In 1927, when he was just 10 years old, Paul claimed he encountered a small humanoid while hiking near the mounds. He described it as a little man with blonde, helmet-like hair. The creature, startled by his presence, vanished into the woods, seemingly melting into the trees themselves. But that was just the beginning. Paul would later recount additional encounters during his youth, each story blending curiosity, fear, and wonder. And though no photographic evidence exists, or could exist, some might argue, the accounts capture the imagination of those familiar with Indiana's forests. Local lore has added layers to these tales over the years. Some residents claim to have glimpsed small figures near trails or the ancient earthworks. Others describe hearing high-pitched voices or strange, indecipherable language echoing through the trees when no one else is around. In some stories, children playing near the park have reported seeing groups of tiny, shadowy figures that vanish almost as soon as they appear. The Pukwudgie seems to exist at the border of perception, a being that is seen, heard, and yet somehow untouchable. It is important to remember, Pukwudgies are creatures of folklore. No scientific evidence confirms their existence, and their descriptions often blend indigenous legend with local storytelling and modern cryptozoology. But that does not make them any less real in the cultural imagination. In fact, legends like the Pukwudgie show us how traditional stories can persist, evolve, and intersect with contemporary fascination with the unknown. In Indiana, these tales live on, not just in parks and forests, but in books, oral histories, and community memory. They are reminders of the power of storytelling, of the way humans have always tried to make sense of the wilderness and its mysteries. The Pukwudgie, elusive and unpredictable, embodies that intersection between nature, myth, and human curiosity. So the next time you wander through the trails of Mound State Park or the deep woods beyond, keep your eyes and ears open. You might just catch a glimpse of a small, fleeting figure, a creature with a mischievous glint in its eyes, standing no taller than 3 feet, who could vanish before you even blink. A little wild man of the woods, a Pukwudgie. Southern Indiana seems to be a haven for otherworldly and unknown legends. Along the winding waters of Silver Creek, a legend has persisted for over a century, a creature locals call the Silver Creek Beast. Silver Creek snakes through Clark and Floyd counties before merging with the Ohio River, its bends and wooded banks offering seclusion, mystery, and, according to witnesses, something far more unsettling than the usual wildlife. The Silver Creek Beast is said to lurk here, a large, powerful animal, sometimes described with glowing eyes, dark matted fur, and a presence that sends chills down the spine of anyone unlucky enough to encounter it. The story begins in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Fishermen casting lines into the creek and mill workers tending to their duties along the banks occasionally reported glimpses of a creature that did not belong to any known species. Some claimed it resembled a massive otter or a wolf, its movements swift and fluid in the water. Others spoke of livestock found torn apart or missing near the creek, tracks in the mud hinting at something larger than a bear, moving with an unnatural stealth. By the mid-20th century, reports became more vivid, more frequent. From the 90s through the 1960s, local teens exploring the creek at dusk night fishermen, and riverside residents told of terrifying encounters. Some described hearing guttural growls echoing through the trees, while others claimed to have seen the creature standing upright on two legs, a hulking shadow, retreating into the dense underbrush or sliding silently into the dark water. Estimates of its size ranged from 6 feet and up, and its presence lingered in the air like a warning. What exactly is the Silver Creek Beast? Locals have long debated. Some insist it is a Bigfoot-like creature, a rare and elusive primate inhabiting the Midwest's forests. Others argue it is a creature of the water, an enormous river otter, a giant catfish, or perhaps something that has yet to be identified. The Ohio River region has a long history of giant fish lore. Tales of monster catfish lurking beneath dams or in deep pools are common, and some researchers think these sightings could have inspired the aquatic interpretation of the beast. There is also the possibility of misidentification. Black bears wandering occasionally into Indiana from neighboring Kentucky could explain some encounters, especially if a bear appears malnourished or unusually large. Yet bears alone do not account for the upright sightings, the guttural screams, or the eerie sense of being watched reported by so many. The legend does not stop at Indiana's borders. Across the Midwest, semi-aquatic monsters, part mammal, part mystery, appear in folklore. From Ohio to Kentucky to Illinois, people describe creatures along riverbanks and wetlands that share characteristics with the Silver Creek Beast. Large, elusive, capable of navigating both land and water with ease. Some suggest these stories are cultural echoes, a shared fear of the unknown lurking in the dark waters of the Midwest. Despite the decades that have passed, the Silver Creek Beast has not vanished from local memory. Modern sightings are rare, but the legend remains alive. It is a topic whispered around campfires, debated in local diners, and written about in regional histories. There is something profoundly human about our fascination with creatures like the Silver Creek Beast. We are drawn to the unknown, to spaces where nature still feels untamed. The creek, with its bends, shadows, and hidden depths, is a perfect stage for imagination to flourish. And when someone claims to hear a scream echo across the water at twilight, or glimpses a hulking figure slipping beneath the surface, it reminds us that the world still holds corners we do not fully understand. For some, the Silver Creek Beast is a warning, a symbol of nature's power, untamed and unpredictable. For others, it is a thrill, a mystery to chase along the riverbanks and wooded trails. And for generations, it has been a storyteller's muse, a creature that connects Indiana's people to their land, their rivers, and the wild histories embedded in both. The Monon Railroad Monster, the Harrison County Hobgoblin, the Pukwudgie, and the Silver Creek Beast. They may not be mere legend. So the next time you go hiking in Indiana's forests, as the sun dips below the trees, listen closely. You may hear the faint rustle of movement, the splash of something large in the water, or perhaps a low, unearthly growl echoing across the creek. And if you do, remember these stories and tread carefully. Keep your eyes on the tree line. You never know what might be watching back. We end Indiana's vast collection of cryptid legend and folklore not looking to the water or to the land, but to the skies. Picture this: a quiet Indiana backroad, cornfields stretching to the horizon, the air heavy before a storm. Then shadow. Not a cloud, not a plane, something alive. Wings spreading wider than the road itself. For generations, Hoosiers have looked to the sky and asked the same question: what was that? I speak of one of Indiana's most enduring and mysterious legends, the Indiana Thunderbird. This is a story that lives at the crossroads of ancient belief and modern eyewitness testimony. It is a tale shaped by Native American oral tradition, fueled by newspaper headlines, and kept alive by people who swear they saw something far too big to be an eagle. Long before Indiana had towns, highways, or even a name, The Thunderbird soared through the spiritual world of Native American cultures across the Great Lakes and Plains. Among Algonquian and Siouan tribes, the Thunderbird was not just a creature, it was a powerful nature spirit. According to legend, it lived in the upper world, above the clouds. Its massive wings created thunder with every beat. Lightning flashed from its eyes. The Thunderbird controlled storms, punished those who broke sacred laws, and protected the balance of nature itself. These stories were not told as fantasy. They were explanations for the overwhelming forces of the natural world, thunderstorms that could flatten forests and lightning that split the sky. And centuries later, when European settlers began reporting encounters with enormous birds, unlike anything in known field guides, the old stories suddenly felt less symbolic and more literal. Fast forward to the late 1940s and 1950s, and reports of massive birds began pouring in across the Midwest. Indiana was right in the middle of it. 1948, multiple witnesses, including a retired U.S. Army colonel, reported seeing a bird so large it was compared to a Piper Cub airplane. Witnesses consistently described enormous, dark wingspans stretching 15 to 20 feet, gliding silently overhead. These were not panicked children or lone observers. These were adults, professionals, people accustomed to judging distance and size, and they all said the same thing. This bird was far too big to be anything familiar. Just across the border in Illinois, the famous 1977 Lawndale incident, where a massive bird allegedly attempted to lift a child, cemented the Thunderbird as a modern cryptozoological phenomenon. Indiana's sightings did not fade after that. They evolved. Even into the 1980s and early 2000s, reports continued to surface from rural Indiana, particularly along isolated roads and wooded farmland in the central and southern parts of the state. Witnesses often used the same phrase. Its wingspan was as wide as a two-lane road. The birds were almost always described as dark, black or deep brown, and powerful, capable of lifting heavy prey. Many encounters happened at dusk or before storms, echoing the Thunderbird's ancient connection to violent weather. Coincidence? Or something older, stirring in the sky? So, what are people seeing? Cryptozoologists propose a radical idea: surviving teratorans. These prehistoric birds once had wingspans exceeding 12 feet. While officially extinct, some theorize small populations could survive in remote regions, rarely seen but not impossible. Skeptics counter with misidentification. Birds like turkey vultures or golden eagles can appear enormous when flying low, especially without clear reference points. Forced perspective can turn a 6-foot wingspan into something that feels monstrous. Another possibility? California condors. With wingspans near 9 feet and dark bodies, they closely match many descriptions, even though they are not native to Indiana. But explanations do not erase experiences, and for those who saw something impossible with their own eyes, science does not always bring closure. Today, the Indiana Thunderbird has fully entered popular culture. Its name was chosen for a massive steel roller coaster at Holiday World in Santa Claus, Indiana, a fitting tribute to a storm-bringing giant that refuses to be forgotten. The Thunderbird may never be proven. It may live only in stories, shadows, and memory. But legends do not survive this long without leaving a mark. So the next time thunder rolls across Indiana and the sky darkens overhead, look up, because if the old stories are true, something very big may still be flying above the clouds. Possibly connecting to the Thunderbird legend in Indiana is an event that occurred in 1891, one of the strangest reports in the state's history. The event became known as the Crawfordsville Monster. This is not your typical cryptid story. No shaggy woods beast, no lurking river monster. What Crawfordsville reported was something far stranger. Residents of Crawfordsville looked up and saw something hovering over their town. Newspapers described it as an 18-foot-long, shroud-like creature with side fins and a single flaming eye. It drifted silently through the sky, floating above rooftops, as if a living thing had somehow escaped the ocean and taken to the air, terrifying onlookers and baffling editors. The story begins on the night of September 5th, 1891. Two local men, John Hornbeck and Abe Hernley, were outside when they noticed something moving overhead. It did not look like anything they recognized. It was not a bird, it was not a balloon, and it was not smoke or cloud. They described it as 20 feet long, pale white or gray, with a soft, undulating motion, like something swimming through invisible water. The creature appeared to ripple and twist as though it were alive. Even more unsettling, it made a wheezing, hissing sound, and at one point the men claimed they saw what looked like a single enormous eye staring down from its mass. Hornbeck and Hernley were not drunk, they were not pranksters, and by the end of the night, they were not alone. Word spread quickly through Crawfordsville. Doors opened, people poured into the streets. Dozens of residents claimed they saw the same thing drifting above the town, passing over rooftops and church steeples. Among the witnesses were respected townspeople, a Methodist minister, businessmen, families, people with reputations to protect. Descriptions varied, but the core details stayed eerily consistent. Some said it looked like a flying serpent. Others called it a living cloud, or a whale-like creature displaced into the sky. It moved slowly, deliberately, not flapping like a bird, but gliding, writhing, as if buoyed by unseen currents, and Crawfordsville became obsessed. Night after night, crowds gathered outdoors, craning their necks toward the darkened sky, hoping for another glimpse. The monster was not just a rumor anymore. It was an event. Newspapers seized on the story immediately. Regional headlines carried breathless accounts of the mysterious aerial creature. In an era fascinated by scientific discovery and unexplained natural phenomena, the Crawfordsville Monster landed at exactly the right moment. Electricity was new, air travel was still a dream. The boundary between science and wonder was thin, and the sky felt suddenly full of possibilities. But not everyone believed. Within days, skeptics began searching for answers. A group of local men, including hunters and a photographer, decided to investigate during one of the peak sighting nights. They watched carefully, studying the movement and listening to the sounds reported by witnesses. Their conclusion was far less fantastical, but no less fascinating. They believed the Crawfordsville Monster was actually a flock of turkey vultures. Turkey vultures were common in the region, but rarely observed flying at night. The investigators suggested that unusual atmospheric conditions, combined with electrical streetlights recently installed in town, may have illuminated the birds from below. Their overlapping wings, circling together in swirling air currents, could easily appear as a single massive organism. The wheezing sound, heavy wing beats, and hissing breath. The undulating motion, multiple birds banking and gliding in unison. The single eye, moonlight, catching a wing or head at just the wrong or right angle. It was a rational explanation, a convincing one, but it did not erase what people believed they had seen. Even after the turkey vulture theory made the rounds, sightings continued to be reported, not just in Crawfordsville, but across the Midwest in the years that followed. Newspapers recorded accounts of luminous, cloud-like creatures, drifting shapes, and airborne forms that seemed alive. Long before flying saucers or alien abductions entered popular culture, Americans were already looking up and wondering. Even if the monster was just birds, the experience was real. The fear was real. The wonder was real. For a few unforgettable nights in 1891, the people of Crawfordsville believed the sky itself had given birth to something alive, and that belief has echoed through Indiana folklore ever since. This concludes today's episode of Seekers of Otherworldly and Unknown Legends. As always, I hope those of you watching or listening are enjoying the stories I am working to keep alive. If so, remember to click the like, share, and subscribe buttons. If you have a story you would like to share or one you would like me to cover, you can email us at soulfilearchives@gmail.com. And if you are interested in experiencing any of the cryptid festivals celebrating all of these unknown legends, you can find a list I've compiled and posted on my website, complete with dates, locations, and website links. I will post website, email, Spotify, and YouTube links in the comments below. Have a good night, a better week, and hope to see you next week as we continue our journey into the unknown.